Welcome back everybody, my name is Tucker, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about a player that strangely, for whatever reason, I haven't really talked about that much on this channel, and that is Zion Williamson. I made a video about him while he was still in college about 8 months ago, and then I of course talked about him in the New Orleans Pelicans season preview video, but beyond that I just haven't really given my thoughts on him, but that changes today. Now, from a basketball standpoint, Zion is incredible for all of the reasons that everyone else has already talked about, and honestly, if you've actually watched this guy play and truly paid attention to the games, and you still don't think he's going to be really good in the NBA for basketball reasons, then I really don't know what to tell you. But today's video is focused on something else as it relates to Zion, and that is how concerned I am about the possibility that, due to circumstances specific to Zion himself, as well as the Pelicans organization as a whole, his career could be completely derailed by injuries. So if somehow you didn't already know, Zion Williamson is going to be missing the first 6 to 8 weeks of his rookie season after having surgery to repair a knee injury. And this is actually not the worst thing, because initially it seemed like the Pelicans didn't actually know what was going on with Zion's knee. There was a report that he was going to miss a period of the first couple of weeks of the season, but they didn't really know why. They just knew that his knee was hurt. So at least now there is an explanation for it, but this is still a concern. He reportedly suffered the injury during a preseason game against the San Antonio Spurs, and it's the same knee that forced him to miss basically all of Summer League after he bumped knees with another player just 8 minutes into the game, although I doubt that those two things are related. And even going beyond that Summer League injury, Zion also had the relatively famous knee sprain as well against North Carolina, in an injury in which he basically came out of his own shoe in what was more than likely just a freak incident. And anytime that you're talking about knee or lower body injuries in general with a guy as big as Zion, it's going to be a concern. But getting more to the point of this video, you could make the case that Zion is going to a team that has had a historically bad record as it relates to medical issues and keeping their players healthy in the New Orleans Pelicans. Back in January, there was a really great article written by Tom Haberstroh at NBC Sports that supports a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about in this video, and I'll leave the link to that down in the description below. And it's really scary to think about how it all relates to Zion Williamson, which obviously wasn't the context of the article at the time. During the 2018-19 season, according to the article, the Pelicans suffered the most player games lost due to injury per an InStreetClothes.com analysis, and they ranked third last and last in the league in that same category the 2 preceding seasons respectively. And in total, over the last 5 seasons, Pelicans players have missed the second most games due to injury or illness in the entire league, ranked only behind the 76ers in that time period, who, as we all know, were pretty intentionally being cautious with their young players earlier in their careers as another branch of their tanking strategy. In that and similar articles that came out around the same time, the case is made that the franchise's medical side has been run mostly by staff that are more familiar with the football side of things rather than basketball, and as a whole, the ownership group, which also owns the New Orleans Saints, have really only cared about the Saints and not so much about the Pelicans. And when you see those games lost due to injury numbers, it's pretty hard to argue against that point. Now sure, you could look at those numbers and say the injuries are so random and there's so many factors that could have gone into those numbers. Maybe the Pelicans were just resting players and they wanted to hide it, so they just said that they were injured when really they were just resting them. And you could certainly say all those things, but the numbers are so conclusive over a relatively long time span that it's really difficult to ignore this, specifically as it relates to a player like Zion that is such an interesting and concerning medical case. And adding to that, and keeping in mind, of course, that I'm not a doctor or a medical expert of any kind, but it's pretty clear to me at least that Zion is a really important and complicated case for 2 reasons. One, he is incredibly valuable to the NBA. He is unlike any number 1 overall pick that we've seen, at least in terms of hype and buzz surrounding him, maybe ever, and certainly since LeBron. His potential for an immediate impact on a team that might be good right away, by the way, his social media presence, and his ability to put together a highlight that could dominate the sports news cycle on any given night make every Zion game an absolute event, especially as a rookie when we all just want to see what this is going to look like in the NBA. And 2, he's an explosive athlete in such a compact frame at 6'7" and over 280 pounds that it just seems like he could have knee or just in general lower body injuries throughout his career, as he dealt with at times at Duke in the preseason and now to begin his rookie season. And just think about how much of a positive impact Zion being great in New Orleans could have on the league. Consider that the Pelicans have finished in the bottom half of the league in attendance percentage every calendar year since they've been in New Orleans, except for the 2014-15 season in which they won 45 games and made the playoffs. This is a market that quite frankly has struggled since gaining an NBA team 6 years ago to find consistent basketball or marketability success with another generational talent in Anthony Davis on the roster for their entire existence, and now they're getting another chance at perhaps the most important NBA athlete since AD, and maybe going back even further to LeBron, and almost nothing that occurred in the AD era gives you any kind of confidence that they'll be able to do much to maximize Zion's success or impact in the NBA. Now, on the bright side, even though this kind of seems like a lot of doom and gloom, this is a team that is now, for the most part, under new management, at least on the front lines, compared to the guys that were there for most of the AD era. Granted, Alvin Gentry is still there as head coach, but well-respected NBA executive David Griffin is now in charge of personnel decisions, and maybe even more notable than the numerous roster decisions that he has made to this point, Griffin has made an effort to not only devote more resources to the medical side of things, but also bring in one of the most highly thought of medical staff members in the league, Aaron Nelson, who spent over 25 years with the Suns as part of what was, inarguably, one of the best medical staffs in the league, credited with extending the productive careers of a number of big-name veterans over the years, including Steve Nash, Shaq, and Grant Hill. And even though that's great, and I'm glad that Griffin is making an effort, I'm glad that he brought in Nelson, and I think he's going to do a good job given the record that he had in Phoenix, you still can't just wish away and ignore the numbers that I've talked about throughout this video. Considering how many well-documented issues there have been on the medical side of the New Orleans Pelicans organization since they've been there, I can't just say, oh, they brought in this new guy, I think everything's going to be fine now, specifically with a case as important and concerning as Zion's. And maybe you're sitting here watching this video and thinking, man, this guy is really overstating and overblowing the impact that Zion Williamson is going to or could have on the New Orleans Pelicans and the NBA as a whole, but I promise you I'm not. Consider how much of an impact he's already had from a news standpoint, from a hype, from a buzz standpoint. There's been so much conversation around this guy from the time that he got to Duke and now going into the NBA. He creates so much conversation, and I would also argue that there hasn't been an NBA player so perfectly suited for the league that he is going into than Zion Williamson ever. He's an incredible athlete, and he can create a highlight on any given play, which works extremely well with this social media era that we're in, and he's an incredibly versatile player and skilled player as well. He can play multiple positions, he can do a lot of things on offense and defense. He's truly a plug-and-play guy on the court, which is perfect for the modern game as well. And just consider how much more excitement there is around this Pelicans team for this season that there wouldn't have been if they didn't get the #1 overall pick, which is illustrated by how many national TV games they're scheduled for this year just because they got Zion with the first pick. It's not that they don't have other good players that people want to watch as a result of the Anthony Davis trade. It's still an interesting team without Zion, but I can promise you they wouldn't have nearly this many national TV games if it wasn't for the first overall pick, and that is just before this guy even plays in a real NBA game. So I promise you, I'm not overstating how impactful Zion is to the NBA and to the Pelicans. Now, I'm not going to say that if he gets injured or he doesn't work out, the NBA is just going to completely fall apart. Of course, that's not the case. But the difference between how successful the NBA will be over the next 10 years with a healthy and peak Zion Williamson playing in the league compared to if he just flames out and never becomes what people hope that he will be and what I believe he could be, the difference between those two scenarios is gigantic. So basically what I'm saying here is I'm pretty worried about Zion's ability to have a long, healthy NBA career moving forward. Some of that is on him as a really big guy and a crazy athlete whose body just might not be built to play 65 to 80 regular season basketball games a year at 30 plus minutes a game. And some of that is on the well-documented and very clear history of borderline medical negligence by the New Orleans Pelicans as a franchise, as a team that simply hasn't been able to keep its players healthy on a consistent basis. And even though they've made strides to improve upon that, given how important Zion figures to be the next 8 to 10 years at least in the NBA, all of these factors combine to create a situation that simply makes me nervous. Now, having said all that, maybe the Pelicans have figured it out with the medical staff and Zion will adjust and learn how to get through the grind of an NBA season relatively injury-free. But I can't help but hold myself back a bit on getting excited about him, which is tough to do because I think this guy's going to be awesome when he's out there on the court, and all I can do at this point is just hope that we get to see peak Zion and that he has a long and healthy NBA career. I just wish that there weren't so many unignorable concerns that show that he might not get that at all. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.